Hi everyone. The first thing I need to say is the music in the background is coming from a speaker in a public place of business. And I just want to clarify that for any copyright issues. That I am not specifically choosing to use any music you might hear in the background, but it is there in the background at the location that I am at. Okay, so I haven't made a video in a while, as you guys who might be watching this can see. Because I need to step back from the whole social media thing on rideshare because driving is my second career. I was career displaced from my heart career. And I've been driving for almost 30 years, and Uber and Lyft have made a disaster of my industry in a lot of ways, despite they are the best system to connect rider and driver that exists in the industry to date. All of my videos that I've made have been out of anger and upset and frustration. And usually when I made them, I didn't really have my thoughts together, and there were a lot of things that I didn't say that got lost in the shuffle that I forgot because I was doing it off the cuff. I'm also doing this video off the cuff, but I've been thinking about it and the things I want to talk about for a while. And some information that I came across over the last couple of days kind of has inclined me to go ahead with this. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is, well, AB5 passed. And for me, that was the last straw. The damage is done. I can't do anything about it. People aren't listening. Okay? People didn't listen when I explained to them about this business. Okay? The facts. And there are a couple of talking points on this. Number one, in the passenger transportation industry, before Uber and Lyft, we were always independent contractors. Okay, the difference was that we had what was called a lease. Okay, and what that lease encompassed was driver services, such as, the label that was the brand, that did the advertising, that created the reputation, that set the prices, and provided certain guidelines that drivers had to work within that may have crossed the employee independent contractor line, but they were all for very good and very sound reasons. Okay, the first one being, why won't they tell us where it's going? Well, because if they tell you where it's going, drivers are going to reject the rides they don't want for the better rides. Okay, but that doesn't change the fact that the little old lady needs a ride across the street to her apartment from Walmart. Okay, it's not fair for somebody's grandmother not to get picked up because the driver didn't want what we called a Twinkie and would rather have the 20-mile ride. Okay, those people would all be left stuck, and the drivers that were willing to be out there providing equal opportunity customer service would get screwed by the drivers that were being selfish. Okay, so this was meant so that everyone had an equal opportunity to be picked up. Okay, when you're in this business, okay, it's not about where you're going or where you want to go. It's where they need to go. And what everybody needs an equal opportunity to get a ride. What was a legitimate concern was not where you're dropping off. Okay, it's not a problem if you're dropping off in a bad neighborhood that might be dangerous, because yeah, you just drop off and you get the heck out of there. Okay, the problem that's more concerning is, well, who or what am I getting into if I pick up this guy at 3 in the morning in a dangerous neighborhood, kind of thing. Okay, I hope you guys can see the difference. Okay, and the way that was handled is some drivers would go, some drivers wouldn't. Okay, and that was your choice. And when we were offered a piece of work, we were told, all right, okay, there's a ride available. These are the cross streets. Who wants it? And this was back in the days of the radio. The dispatcher would say, I need a cab here. And, whoever spoke up on their radio first would get it. When they went to the computer system, they would send you the info via computer. They would send it to the first driver, to the closest driver logged in the area. Or when we didn't have that much specifics on exact pinpointed locations, the drivers would manually or verbally log into a certain zone, quote unquote, and the first driver logged in would be offered the ride first, and that driver could hit yes or no, or accept or decline, or whatever the terms were on that computer system, and either take the ride or not. And there weren't any questions. It just went to the next driver. And the fact of the matter was, there were times in difficult neighborhoods that no one would take a ride. In fact, back in the early 2000s, when I drove for discount, about 12:30 every night, the dispatcher would get on the radio. I need a cab at 24th Street and Broadway. No one would take it. Well, it turned out it was the same lady, and she was going to work at the hospital. And it was like a $12 ride, I think. And she would come out every night at the same time. And once it got established that it was the same customer going to the same place that wasn't going to do anybody harm, she was just a low-income resident of this bad neighborhood going to her miserable low-income job like a good person should, and he would start saying, who's going to go pick up Geraldine? So, and at that point, once it was established that's, who this lady was, and she was a nice lady going to work, it would be like, when the call came out, he'd be just directly saying, who's going to go pick up Geraldine, and somebody would go get her. So, yeah, you can't have that information. And everybody bitched, well, we're not real independent contractors because we're not getting that invitation. And boom, or that information. And boom, as soon as Uber gave it to them, the issue was, oh, is there going to be destination discrimination now? Blame Uber. It's not Uber's fault. It's selfish human beings' fault. Okay? That are out for number one, not comprehending that this is a customer service industry. And I'm not awake yet. And I have trouble speaking because of the damage to my jaw, which is the reason I don't have speech. So that's why I have trouble speaking sometimes. Okay, the second thing is setting your own prices. Okay. You are contracted with a company who is the label, who is the brand, who has set the reputation, and customers want to know when they receive services from a representative of this company, they are getting the company's price, not like, oh my God, I gotta find a driver who isn't gonna charge me an arm and a leg, and be stuck if the only driver in their area wants to charge $8 a mile, which is an exaggeration, but you guys get the point, okay? All right, and then on the other hand, the other part of the issue with drivers setting their own prices is the competition, okay? Because there are drivers out there that they're totally cutthroat and they will undercut you. Okay, it happened out here in Phoenix when 4,000 of us left the labels and went independent. Okay, you'd be on the street picking up and you'd be negotiating a price with somebody if you were a livery, or you would have set rates if you were a cab with a meter, and another livery would come by and said, hey, how much are they charging you? I'll do it for this. Okay, and you'd be sitting there without your ride because, of course, the people are going to, you're telling them 50 and some guy who's desperate comes by and says, I'll do it for 35. Well, guess where your customer is going? Okay, so you've lost a legitimate fare because the other guy is willing to undercut you and himself to get the ride because we're all competing for rides out there. Okay, so this system doesn't work either. That's why they don't allow drivers to set their own prices, okay, because you are representing a brand. Okay, the other part of that is that, and like when we were cab drivers, it was different because it was a business. You were committed to pay your quote-unquote rent. You had to pay for those reservation services, for the label, for the advertising, so on and so forth, for all the people working in the office, taking reservations. You were paying for the company's good reputation that allowed them to receive customers and then forward the work to a group of drivers out there. And some companies had a no-compete clause, which meant that you were not allowed to solicit their customers to personalize them. And Uber and Lyft have those agreements. You're not supposed to solicit Uber and Lyft customers to generate your own business. But with most of these cab companies, the way things used to be, yes, they made their money off of those services and leasing cars. Okay, but because they were the label, they set the rates because they had to be consistent across the board to be fair to all drivers and all customers. Okay, but because you were paying for all this, when they gave you a customer, that customer was yours to do whatever you wanted with. Okay, and you could make your own schedule, but it wasn't anywhere near as flexible as Uber and Lyft because you were paying for all these services and you had an agreement and you either had to pay for the services, you committed to working a particular day or by the week, you were obligated to pay for that week. I mean, yeah, there were times when drivers would just turn in the car and not pay, but you couldn't drive again until you paid up. And if you didn't want to drive again, well, they wrote that loss off, just like in any other company. But with Uber and Lyft, it just causes a problem. It causes a stress for the customer buying a driver that'll take them, for the lower the payment that they want, and it not being fair across the board, and drivers undercutting each other, causing grief to drivers that even are charging a reasonable price that they are entitled to due to the cost of their expenses and their own self-worth. And I'm not talking about drivers that jack up the prices because they think that they're entitled. I'm talking about drivers that set a fair price that's in the middle of the guys that are priced high and the guys that are undercutting. Okay, that doesn't work. And I don't know what the results are. Okay, but again, they all bitched about that. And then when it happened is, well, see guys, this is the problem. Okay, you're going to be trying to make an honest living, and there's going to be a bunch of guys that are slashing you by undercutting you. So that didn't work. Okay, and the reality was, in this industry, you went out there and you got that. I mean, it's just like opening any other kind of business. You open an auto parts store or a restaurant or a convenience store or a clothing shop. You go to work in the morning and you open the store at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning and you close it at 5 or 6 or 9 or 10. Okay, and I can tell you, I worked in a convenience store, and there are times when there may not be a customer for 2 hours, but you got to keep the store open, because at 3 o'clock, when people start getting off of work, you're going to start getting slammed because people are stopping by when they're getting off work. Same with transportation. Okay, it's going to get busy when people are going to work or people are coming home to work, as one example of times that are going to be busy. Rush hour. Okay. Uber and Lyft allow you to go out and just work rush hour, and you can do that. Okay, and you can do well. Okay, but there are times of the day where you're not going to get work because nothing's going on, and that's the way it is. Okay, so drivers would go out there, and basically 2 or 3 days, either they caught on and they'd stick it out and they made money, or they wouldn't make money. Okay, and even drivers that did go out there and try it and tried to make money and stayed out for several hours and just could not connect, for whatever reason. Either they were in the wrong place, either they would sit and wait in the wrong place, or they wouldn't move around, or they would stay close to their own neighborhood where it was quiet instead of moving towards an area where it's busy, or figuring out how to do their own research on where the events were going to be and when and where people were going to be moving around town. Drivers that didn't catch on to that stuff because this job, quote unquote, wasn't for them. Okay, but the other guy would come out and be like, oh yeah, I've been driving 2 weeks and I love it, I'm making so much money, and they'd be happy and they'd become one of us. Okay, but going back to the point, and I know I get off point, going back to the point about the independent contractor versus employee, it's a trade-off. Okay, because these larger labels that have the money and the manpower to put themselves out there, they are the ones that are doing the legwork to get the business. And all you need to do is be out there working and available, and they give you customers. And sometimes there are lots of customers, and sometimes there aren't any customers. And that's the way it is. And there are a lot of variables, and it's all luck in the draw, a luck of the draw. Okay? Some days you get caught in an area doing Twinkies, but eventually you'll get a ride out. There are good rides and there are bad rides. Hopefully you get more good rides than you get bad rides, but it's the way it is. That's life. You got to take the good and the bad. You can't have all the silver lining all the time. That's the way it is in any business. Now, if you didn't like if you liked the driving part and providing these kind of services, okay, but you didn't like those issues that cross the employee versus independent contractor line because it eliminated some of your choices in the interest of overall best for all drivers and all passengers, you would go out and you would do your own legwork and pay for your own insurance. That was going to be higher than the group rate the company got. Comparing that now, that's going to be higher than just the rideshare endorsement that gets tacked onto your regular liability insurance if you drive for Uber and Lyft. You go out and you're going to pay for your own commercial insurance. You're going to pay for your own advertising and promotions. And you are going to do your own customer acquisition and close potential clients. That's what the difference is, okay? And if you don't want to do that, then you drive for a company that is providing you the work and you have to follow their guidelines. It's not, oh, well, this is not what I want and they should do what I want for me. It's if you don't like what's going on, go do something else so that you can get things the way you want them and have those choices. You want all the cream in the crop, then go get it yourself. That's about that. So what inclined me to make this video is I follow a reporter by the name of John Stossel, and he used to be a major network reporter, and I don't know which network, but now he's an independent. And, his videos are basically about the lunacy of people not taking responsibility, and being entitled. And what's really going on, and a lot of the ridiculousness, and this comes back to all that. But anyway, the information, and you can go to his channel and find it yourself. I'm not even going to take the time to go dig up the link and post it, but just go to John Stossel's channel. And you'll find he did a video, he published it yesterday or the day before, about the end of freelance work because of California AB5. And if you go into the comments, what you'll find out is Lorena Gonzalez was a union leader before she ran to be a lawmaker. And it's the same old bullshit. Cronyism, okay? And there was the school of thought that this is what the unions wanted. And basically, Uber and Lyft gave them the excuse they needed. The protests from Uber and Lyft drivers gave them the excuse they needed to develop a law. There was comments to the effect of that union people actually wrote the law for her, and it's not a good thing. And, whoever these drivers were that were protesting, they're entitled. And they're totally, they're totally off the wall to, not accepted their own responsibility for their own choices, and maybe this situation wasn't for them, being a gig worker, and moving on. So now, what, on the bright side of the coin, it was assumed that all these companies that hired independent contractors were now going to make them into employees. And that's not what happens. What happened is they all got laid off. People lost their jobs, lost their sources of income. And these people still think it's a good thing. There was an Uber driver group that I was in when this passed. Somebody posted the article talking about how it passed, and then they wrote a scathing comment. Okay, and they directed it at all of those people that were scamming and taking advantage of Surge and blah, blah, blah. I don't remember. It's been a long time. I actually screenshotted the whole conversation and my response. Okay, and that comes to another reason that was kind of the straw that caused me to decide that I am shutting off this channel. Which I did. I've only watched one video, and it was one of Justin's videos since this news became available, that AB5 is passed. It is now set in stone, yada yada. And the discussion now is, well, this got passed for the people that got exempt, the industries that got exempt was because they had money to give lawmakers. This is how it works. People get paid off to make the laws so that they favor certain parties. If your party or your interest has the money to pay lawmakers, then you get what you want. Otherwise, you get screwed. So the trucking industry was exempt. But for instance, writers, photographers, and musicians are not. And little mom and pop guys are not. And gig workers are not exempt. And this is happening in other states. And what this is taking away our freedoms. I am 58 years old. I have worked as a freelance person since I was 23. In the previous industry I worked in, there were some entities that paid me as an employee, and some entities that paid me for the job or for the day, or for, if I would go on the road with a private client to a horse show, I would get paid $145 a day. Okay, and they would cover and they would get me a room. And in that $145 a day, that included some other specific services that were paid on top of, my groom's pay, like braiding. I got paid. Part of that was I specifically got paid to braid a horse's mane or tail. That was a specific job. Wasn't paid as an employee. I was paid as an independent contractor. When I worked for the Goldens Bridge Hounds, because they're a 501c3 private organization, or not, they might not have been a 501c3, but I bet they were. But everything was on the books, and I worked part-time for them, and I got paid by the hour as an employee. There were times when part of my salary was housing, and then the rest of my money was cash. I was paid in different ways, but I had the flexibility to choose. If I wanted to work for a particular entity that paid me as an employee, I could. Or I could work for an entity that paid me, per job. Like sometimes there were 5 horses to braid on a Saturday morning, so I got paid to braid 5 horses. Paid per horse. Okay, there were other times when I got paid for the day, and it was a flat rate, and maybe I'd have to be up at 4 in the morning, maybe I'd have to be up at 6, and maybe I'd be able to quit by 7, or maybe I'd be able to quit by 9. I got a flat rate for that day, or for the trip. But actually, usually I just got paid for the day, no matter how many days. But that day could be 6 hours, or it could be 12 hours. And that was a choice that I had. Okay. And, since the money was coming from a private individual a lot of the time, who is just a hobby person that's paying somebody to travel with them and take care of their horse and polish their boots and make sure that everything is in order so they can compete, I got paid. They were charged for my services, and then I was either paid by the barn management whose client I went with, or I was paid directly by the client if the client contracted me directly without going through their trainer or barn management. And that's just the way that it works. And like the same thing with house painters. My kid's dad used to go out with a guy that was a house painter, and it was called piecework. They would get paid per house, whether it took them 3 days or 5 days. Whether they were stuck not working for a week because it rained, they would still get paid the same amount they would get paid per house in the subdivision that was going up to go paint the exterior. Okay? And that was that.